Yeah, we're recording this, so if you don't want to be recorded, just turn off your video.
So Luke, tell me your interest.
Cool. I've been a busker for a long time, working with stories in the street, and writing stories with people around Europe mostly. And now I'm starting out to create a space for people to be able to write stories and share stories. So I'm bringing a shelter into the street, essentially, with all the facilities and equipment, like typewriters and a lot of analog writing equipment. And I want to use it to pop up in public to increase awareness of the rights that we've got to our streets and our spaces. And yeah, I always just busked as by just going away and setting up, and now I'm coming towards things through a more professional bent and meeting people like producers for the first time. So just beginning to navigate this intersection of industry and activism in a professional framework. So that's where I'm at.
And Christine, hello. Haven't seen you for a while. And your interest, is there anything of particular that you'd like to talk about?
I guess hello, blast from the past. It's lovely to see you and love the presentation. And yeah, well, in the last 18 months have become the year of the field for me. I moved outdoors. I'd never really been hugely drawn to doing outdoor work, I guess. Being based in Scotland, it doesn't always seem so attractive. But out of a sort of need for myself, I kind of took my practice outdoors and started sharing it with others. And of course, it was very, very public in a time where there wasn't much happening publicly and performatively. And it felt like gentle activism. That's what, in some sort of way. So I'm just more interested in maybe like Luke's saying, like, how do we, this new interest, bring it to the work that we've been doing, and what does that, and for me, what does that mean for me and my work? Yeah. So.
Justina?
Hi. So yeah, my work fluctuates between the street and indoors, and between political content and more personal messages. And yeah, throughout the past decade, I worked with either organizations or just volunteer groups from demonstrations to putting on our own show called As Time Goes By, which was a very slow motion walk. Back in 2010, we did one in Edinburgh, one in Bristol, and one in Budapest. It's like just clocks, like white face, clock faces, or like broken clocks on our face, and just picked really easy shopping streets to do this very slow motion walk. For example, Edinburgh's Princes Street took us 3 hours, which is less than a mile.
I think you're frozen. We'll come back to you. Jane, hello there.
With them, again, based on the slow motion and just down happened, and because we had quite a few vulnerable or old people in the group, we decided not to proceed with rehearsals at the time. But I'm also working some more personal stories, which are, I guess, it's always quite political anyway, about skin color, about body image, about gender identity. So I'd really like to just talk with others what's the experience of putting it outdoors, especially with the current climate and the new legislations. So yeah, I just want to get inspired and get moving again after 18 months of, do I want to do this?
Thank you, Jane.
Hi, Hilary.
Hi there.
Hello. I'm quite interested just in general about the, as I understood from your presentation, Hilary, about while your work is political, it's not overtly political, because it is, the context sometimes is, it's too complicated and it could end up being terribly worthy, which is obviously not what your work is. And the contrast between that and what Doug has done, which is blatantly political. And I think I'd quite like to ask Doug, I mean, did you feel politically inspired to do that? That might sound a strange question, but what was your actual motivation for doing it? Or did it just seem like a good idea at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say if it was political. It's sort of very emotional or personal. I wanted to do something beautiful, really. That, yeah. So I mean, it sort of formed around obviously a political moment and you know, a sort of a rebellion situation with XR. I felt very personally sort of drawn to do something, and to do something sort of beautiful, and rather than being overtly political or speaking or shouting or protesting or explaining, just kind of trying to embody something which is like a really, you know, serious and upsetting situation, environmentally speaking. So trying to respond to that creatively and personally, really. So I guess it was obviously by its nature and by the event and everything, it was very political, but it did feel quite beyond that, I suppose. And I really wasn't thinking about it externally. I was thinking about it much more personally, of what I wanted to do to respond to that situation, and doing something that wasn't in my sort of, because I'm a ringmaster and I work a lot with words. So I could sort of see myself going down that route and you know, and hosting a stage or using a megaphone or something like that. But I just wanted to do something else that was a bit more emotive or emotional, I suppose.
And I think that shows the success and the power of the image. And I think that was partly what I was talking about in terms of, you know, although I've been involved with these political campaigns and would very much like to do something to reflect my commitment to it, I do believe that you can get a much stronger reaction if you have these strong images, because, you know, you sort of, I mean, if you're in a campaign, if you're aware of it, you sort of know who the goodies and the baddies are, or who you identify with as the goodies and the baddies. So you want to open up that dialogue in some way. And I think, as Doug said, what was fantastic about his figures is that they do touch people emotionally. They do evoke something beyond the information that one would get much more coherently and cogently in documentaries or news or papers. And I think this is always the search to get the strong images that disturb and evoke and offend and unsettle. And that those very, very successful at doing all of those things.
Yeah, people cried. Just sort of randomly people would start weeping, or, you know, not everyone had that kind of a response either. There's quite a lot of sort of some elated responses as well, but yeah, it was interesting to see that. Yeah, and the way that it kind of humanized the police, and sort of a leveler between all those things in their responses.
Yeah, I think it was very good when you said, you know, you heard from the police saying, don't arrest, whatever you do, don't arrest the red people. I think that does show the power of such unsurprising. And Gandalf, do you tell me about your interest in this? I'm calling you Gandalf because that's your name down here. Can you, and you're muted.
Oh, okay. Hi, can you hear me?
I can very well.
Good. Starting historically or just in the present?
just sort of your general interest in the art and activism sector of the symposium.
So currently, until the lockdown with the virus, I ran a circus school, circus club, not school, in Edinburgh. And until maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was an incredible place which had a combination of kids and adults. And there wasn't any hierarchy about that. People were teaching each other. It wasn't, you know, and now we're all going to do this thing. And there was a feeling when demonstrations would happen, a lot of us, not as an official club activity, but we'd just go out and we'd use, so I had a little bit of background of improvisational theater. And that kind of playing with people where you just start playing and you're doing things and you're being playful, and then you catch an interest and you take that and you ride it and you improvise and you draw people along, and it's like a conversation. It is a conversation, and you can make points and you can be subtle and you can watch if somebody's being really rejecting you, maybe who you want to talk to through the apparent conversation with the person rejecting you is you're talking to the other people who are watching you to make a point. So, you know, juggling, we do things like we're juggling bombs, and this is perfectly safe and we never drop. And you know, we can trust the government. We can trust these things not to happen. Whoops, sorry, that will never happen again. Just a very simple example. But I love the interaction with people. I used to go out on the streets in San Francisco, and I had a few friends that sometimes I could get them to come out and play with me, but not always. And we'd go out and we just try to involve people in our play, not necessarily political, but just to get people in entering your sphere of creativity, of spontaneity. And sometimes it would go on for maybe 20 minutes with a group of people. And then suddenly they'd like, oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be somewhere, with a smile on their face and going away because we'd created a good moment. And yeah, I think creating a good moment is very political, but not ignoring the political realities about suppression, about resentful attitudes that some people have towards certain groups. And one of the things I liked in the circus club is that you have people coming in, for example, you have refugees that are coming into the thing and speak no English. And how can you relate to people when you don't have that, oh, I know how to talk, I'll tell you how to do things. It's like I once taught English for a very short time to 3 blind people in Brazil. And how do you teach language to somebody that you can't point to anything? So those elements of indirection.
I mean, I would agree. Just let me just
Yes.
a second. I mean, I would certainly agree that all these things that you're talking about are political. I mean, if you look at a lot of ever such a lot of street work and alternative, I talk about alternative theatre, but even mainstream theatre is much more I don't know, confronting of issues that wouldn't have been, say, 20 years ago. But you're talking very much about, you know, the relationship with the public and the interaction with them as being a political gesture, which I would agree and experience.
Can be.
But can be, certainly, and also, you know, can provoke hostility. But I would ask all of you, I suppose, is that, you know, that there is the desire to create strong, moving, affecting images. There could be more words to that, but let's say those for now. To what extent would you say that current political issues or situations, whether it's our government, whether it's international politics, informs your desire to work or to create these images, whatever they may be, or ever work? Do you find that you're involved with the news or newspapers, and is that something that informs your work, do you think? Anybody?
I think I'll answer, but obviously not from an audience perspective as to what I might choose to see or what I would want to see. Firstly, I think that there are political issues that become kind of zeitgeist issues, as we all know, and then there's a big glut of performance creations, about indoor, outdoor, wherever, films about a particular issue. And I tend to get really weary of that, because a lot of it feels like people are jumping on a bandwagon with good intentions, I'm sure. So I would personally usually prefer to see work that is more nuanced and multi-layered, that is political if you choose to find that in it, if that makes any sense. I mean, on the whole.
Sita, hello, nice to see you. What is your interest in this area?
Hello. Apologies for being late. I had a Hearts and Minds Clown Doctor meeting this morning, and my interest in this area is making, I guess, like a theme in my work has come out is the environment. And then when you say it, I feel like the word environment has become a term that's just a word, it doesn't mean anything. And so I'm constantly trying to read up or learn about, all the different ways of talking about our relationship to the environment, and looking at inspiration from other artists and things. And I just feel like I've got to a point where it's very easy in applications or when I'm writing work to say it's about the environment, or being or looking at the sort of psychological, or like the effects of a decaying environment, or an environment in a crisis on like the psyche, and then sort of extrapolating from that, okay, what's that mean at a personal level, of like ideas of like Anthropocene. It's just like goes into like all these other things that are political but are also kind of like psychological, and so I guess it's like I would like to get to a point where I can maybe articulate things better in terms of if I am being activisty about it, or if it's activism in itself without having to call it that, or yes. So
But using text, or
yes, using text, using as a framework to create a show or to create work as well. So I guess I'm interested in how like the lived experience and sort of community experience of issues or more political themes infiltrate into like the creation of work. And yeah.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Just one second, God. I mean, it would seem that what a lot of you are talking about is that mixing of the personal and the political. And a lot of it, I mean, I think the environment is a general issue that a lot of people are addressing. And I mean, it's a difficult thing. I mean, I think Doug's image absolutely fabulous in terms of that intervention. But I think that the combination of when you want to make a point and when you want to create a reaction, I think that is quite a challenging one. And I think from what people are saying, I mean, that's a challenging one for me. I mean, that's why in my talk, if you heard it, the two worlds have remained separate, even though I think my performance work is considered radical and political in many ways. I have alongside really quite specific political campaign work. So I'm quite interested in, and of course one's relationship with that issue is essential to get clear, but that's often easier to do intellectually than it is to do artistically. And so that's what I'm quite interested to get from you. And Gandalf, I'll start with you, about how for you these two interact. Finding the language, I know, is always a challenge for everybody. And when one finds it, as I will say that I think Doug has done, it's very gratifying. But the rest of you, Gandalf, what are your thoughts on this?
So what Sita was saying, I'm just going to jump as to why, when I wanted to talk, but it reminded me that there's a lot of research now into the psychology of how people approach things, political and otherwise, is more about when you achieve empathy with somebody and you express your feelings about an issue, that has more impact than if you tell people hundreds of people are being killed, there are thousands of people in human slavery, refugees are dying because they don't have support, etc. The facts are not what are as influential to most people. It's feeling how other people are feeling about it. And sometimes these people in other places are too far away and the media doesn't portray them in a way that they develop empathy for that we develop empathy for them. So if we are bridges in things where we are not trying to come across, you assholes out there don't understand what's happening, but we're saying, do you see that this thing touches me in this way? This is how I feel about it. And so in terms of creativity, it's funny, it's the contrary. When I was looking at this thing about the all the people in red, and I had this image of coming up with a costume that you're all in bandages and you have blood pumps secreted on your body. So you are dripping blood as you go along the road, right? And it's a very strong visual image. But it occurred to me that it isn't something that's going to evoke empathy in people. A lot of people, it would just bump them away from whatever point you're trying to make. So how do you do that that thing that draws people into feeling something for you, and then they listen, and maybe on a very subconscious level, to what you are saying, not just to how you're being.
Indeed, I mean that is the challenge, I think, isn't it? That is the challenge, and that's why I was saying when you hit on it, it's immensely gratifying. Emily, welcome. Do you have any thoughts on this area in relationship to what you do?
Hi, sorry, I just turned my video on. I was having a morning of not having it on, but yeah, it was just it's maybe really obvious, and maybe it's already been said because I did arrive late as well. Apologies. That for me, I feel like it's hard for certain people to say what is political and what isn't is a question I feel like we need to ask ourselves sometimes, or I ask myself. So it's something which for me, I'm able to, in some instances, remove myself from the political aspect of something, of life. Then that's because of a certain position I hold in society or a certain privilege, and other people are not able to. So there's something like, is all work political? But it might not be overtly political, but in the way that we're doing it and the way that we're acting whilst we're doing it, and the practices behind it, the processes, who we're working with, how we're working together, that putting a political practice into the process and how we work and collaborate together feels like somewhere where it can be really sincere and not just be jumping on the bandwagon, as Jane's saying. So yeah, I just have these questions about, can we even say that something isn't political? I'm not really sure.
Well, I think certainly in the sector of work, you know, the not only the way that work is created, but the places it performs, the people it plays, the people it includes. I mean, that obviously has a socio-political content, and it's done in that context. I suppose it's given that, I think let's given that is the given for this area of work, and you know, and putting images, work in areas that aren't expected on the streets, or interventions, that obviously has a disruptive and professional role. But in the creating of this work, which most of us are involved with doing, I suppose it's what I think Doug was quite articulate in the way that, you know, how he came about his red figures. It's just how much you are, apart from your desire to share your ideas with your public, whoever they may be, to what extent are current political issues informing what you do in the content of the work? Does it inform it, or are you doing things sidelong? Luke.
Thanks, Hilary. Just it's more of a question than I've got no answer. In terms of our responsibility as professional practitioners of this essential nonsense that really helps people's imaginations come to the fore and reinvigorates the streets with playfulness and the emotions which and the culture which a lot of the business of the everyday seems to lack in our current society. What responsibility have we got to engage outside of professional parameters and do work that is not being commissioned by anybody, is not necessarily is not advancing our professional practice in a way, just to bring our skill set to the streets and do things like XR and involve ourselves? Or should we be only engaging through this professional lens? That's a provocation, I guess, for everybody.
Okay, I think we've got just under 3 minutes, so I think we're asking questions without necessarily getting any answers to these. Does anybody have any comments on Luke's question? Any? I
mean, I think it was really, for me, it was really interesting doing the red thing with XR, just to use all of your professional knowledge and sort of experiences and do something completely sort of free of all of that, you know. So I think there's a huge liberation in that, and it did make me, it's just something like, I just do it. I don't need to be funded. I don't need to be given permission. I don't need anything. Do you know what I mean? I just need to pull some people and materials together and make this thing happen.
You need to have the idea. That's the key thing. You need to have the idea and the commitment to make it happen. That, I think that, let's not underestimate that. I mean, it's not that we don't have ideas, but there's other stages to getting things on. You know, okay, you just got some red material, you just got a bunch of people. You know, it's you know, I think none of us underestimate the effort and the commitment and the work that takes.
And the network.
And the network, yeah, which you have to create, yeah, and that you have to find out the best network and look at little possibilities and create and develop it. I think we're being invited to return to the main room. Does anybody want to say anything just to finish up? A couple of sentences, Christine.
I just wanted to say thanks for sort of opening things up and provoking. So now I've got sort of questions around, like, when does I trust that my work is political in some way, but when can it become activism, and what does that actually mean? I think that, so, and reflecting on how does my response to the news and current issues go into the work, and I've written words: disturb, evoke, unsettle, provoke, make a point, reaction, which, yeah, sort of, that's what's staying with me now.
Okay, I'll see you all back in the big room. Thank you very much.
All right.